Tae-min stood in his office on the 47th floor of the United Earth Embassy building, staring at the holographic message that floated above his desk. He read it 3 times, certain he was missing something important. The Galactic Council wanted to visit Earth for an unusual reason. They wanted to eat with humans. This was strange, very strange. For 3 years, humanity had been part of the galactic community. In that time, Tae-min had attended hundreds of meetings with alien species. He had negotiated trade agreements, discussed territorial boundaries, and participated in countless diplomatic sessions. But never once had he eaten a meal with an alien. Nobody had. The other species in the galaxy treated eating like humans, treated using the bathroom. It was private. Necessary. Something done alone, and quickly, without discussion. The idea of eating together seemed to make them uncomfortable. Hana walked into his office carrying 2 cups of coffee. She was his cultural liaison officer, and had worked with him since humanity's first contact with the aliens. She set 1 cup on his desk and noticed his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. Tae-min gestured at the hologram. "Read this." Hana leaned forward, her eyes scanning the message. Her eyebrows rose higher with each line. When she finished, she looked at Tae-min with confusion, and something else. Excitement. "Maybe. They want to have lunch with us?" she said. "Apparently, they've heard rumors about human meal traditions. They find it curious that we eat together as a social activity." Hana sat down in the chair across from his desk. She took a sip of her coffee, thinking, "This is actually a huge opportunity. Do you know how many conflicts we've struggled to resolve because we can't connect with them socially? They respect our technology and our negotiation skills. But they don't understand us." "Not really." Tae-min nodded slowly. She was right. The aliens saw humans as efficient and clever, but also strange. Human emotional responses puzzled them. Human art, music, and literature made no sense to their logical minds. The cultural gap was enormous. "What do you think we should do?" he asked. "We should say yes," Hana replied immediately. "And we should make it memorable. Show them what makes humanity special." Tae-min smiled. This was why he valued Hana. She saw possibilities where others saw problems. "All right. Draft a response. Tell them we would be honored to host a formal lunch. Earth style." Over the next few days, news of the upcoming lunch spread through the diplomatic community. The reactions were mixed. Some human officials were excited, seeing it as a chance to build stronger relationships. Others were worried, afraid that some cultural misunderstanding would create an incident. The alien response was even more interesting. According to reports from human ambassadors on other worlds, the Galactic Council's decision had caused confusion and debate. Many species thought the Council was making a mistake. Some called it undignified. Others said it was a waste of time. But there was also curiosity. Many aliens had secretly wondered about human eating habits. They had seen footage of human gatherings where food was present. Birthday parties, wedding receptions, business dinners, holiday celebrations. The aliens noticed that humans seemed to bond over these events in ways that formal meetings never achieved. Ambassador Velmoth of the Vel Confederation sent a private message to Tae-min. The reptilian diplomat had always been professional, but distant in their previous interactions. His message was brief, but revealing. "I confess I do not understand why my people eat," it read. "We consume nutrients. We continue functioning, that is all. But I have watched humans eat together, and I see something happens that I cannot explain. Perhaps this lunch will help me understand." Tae-min showed the message to Hana. She read it twice, then looked at him with soft eyes. "He's asking for connection. They all are. They just don't have the words for it." The preparations began in earnest. Tae-min and Hana met with officials from Earth's government to discuss the event. They would host 12 alien species representatives, including High Chancellor Rix of the Lumina, a crystalline being who served as one of the Council's senior leaders. The location was chosen carefully. They would use Harmony Hall, a new facility on the lunar diplomatic base. The hall had been built specifically for cultural exchange events, though it had rarely been used. Most aliens preferred standard conference rooms. The biggest challenge was the menu. Hana brought in Ji-woo, a xenobiologist who had spent years studying alien dietary requirements. The young scientist arrived at the embassy with a thick folder of notes and a worried expression. "Some of this is going to be very difficult," Ji-woo explained, spreading documents across the conference table. "The Lumina don't technically eat. They absorb light energy. The Kraliks are carnivorous and require raw protein. The Mothwings can only consume liquids. And that's just 3 species. Can you do it?" Taemin asked. Ji-woo bit her lip, thinking, "I can create dishes that are safe for all of them. But I don't know if they'll appreciate it. Most of these species have never considered food as anything except fuel." "That's exactly what we want to change," Hana said. "We need someone who can cook food that speaks to the soul, not just the stomach." That was when they brought in Daewon. He was a master chef from Seoul, famous for his ability to blend traditional Korean cuisine with modern techniques. When he heard about the project, his eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that only a true artist could have. "You want me to cook for aliens who have never tasted anything?" he said. "This is the greatest challenge of my life." Daewon spent a week working with Ji-woo, learning about alien biology and dietary restrictions. He experimented with flavors, textures, and presentations. He created dishes that were safe for all species, but still carried the heart of human cooking. Meanwhile, Hana worked on the cultural aspects of the event. She prepared briefing materials, explaining human meal traditions. She selected music, arranged seating, and planned the flow of the lunch. Every detail mattered. 1 week before the lunch, Taemin received another message from the Galactic Council. They were sending observers to watch the preparations. They wanted to understand what made this lunch different from a standard nutrient break. 3 alien observers arrived the next day. They followed Daewon around his kitchen, watching him cook with expressions of deep confusion. Why did the appearance of food matter? Why did he taste things repeatedly, adjusting seasonings? Why was he humming while he worked? One of the observers, a tall insectoid creature, finally asked Daewon a question. "What is the purpose of this effort? The nutrients are the same whether the food is beautiful or not." Daewon paused, holding a spoon of soup he had been perfecting. He thought for a moment, then smiled. "When I cook, I'm not just feeding bodies. I'm feeding hearts. I'm creating a moment that people will remember. Food is love made visible." The alien stared at him, completely baffled. It wrote something in its report device and walked away. Hana watched the exchange from the doorway. She looked at Taemin, who had also been observing. "They really don't understand," she said quietly. "Not yet," Taemin replied. "But they will." Daewon's kitchen had become a laboratory of impossible challenges. He stood surrounded by 17 different testing stations, each one designed to accommodate the dietary needs of a different alien species. Steam rose from pots. The air smelled of spices, broths, and something that Ji-woo had synthesized to be edible for silicon-based lifeforms. "This one needs to be completely liquid," Ji-woo said, pointing to a pale green soup that shimmered under the lights. "The moth wings cannot process solid matter. Their digestive system works through absorption." Daewon tasted the soup carefully. His face showed concentration. "It's nutritionally complete, but it has no soul. It tastes like medicine." "A1. It is medicine, basically," Ji-woo replied. "For them, eating is just chemical processing." "Then we need to change that," Daewon said firmly. He added something to the pot. A pinch of salt, a drop of sesame oil, a whisper of ginger. He stirred it slowly, tasted again, and nodded. "Better. It won't change their biology, but maybe it will change their mind about what eating can be. Ji Woo watched him work with fascination. She was a scientist, trained to think about nutrition in terms of molecules and energy. But Day One thought about food differently. To him, every dish was a story. Every flavor was an emotion. She was beginning to understand why Hana had insisted on bringing him to this project. Across the facility, Hana was dealing with her own challenges. She sat in a meeting room with 3 alien cultural advisors who had been assigned to observe the lunch preparations. They were supposed to help bridge the cultural gap, but mostly they just seemed confused. "Explain again why the food will be placed in the center of the table," said one of the advisors. A gray-skinned humanoid from a species called the Thalmar. "Why not give each being their own portion?" "Ain 8 gray skin be." One of the advisors, "Sharing food from common dishes is a human tradition," Hana explained patiently. She had explained this 5 times already. It creates a sense of community. Everyone eating from the same source builds trust. The Thalmar advisor looked horrified. But the risk of contamination, the mixing of biological materials, this seems dangerous. "We've tested everything," Hana assured him. Ji Woo has verified that all the dishes are safe for all species. There's no danger. Ji Woo. Physical danger? Perhaps not, the advisor said slowly. But social danger. In my culture, sharing food sources is something only mates do. It implies a level of intimacy that would be inappropriate in a diplomatic setting. Hana made a note on her tablet. This was going to be more complicated than she had thought. What humans considered friendly and welcoming, other species might see as invasive or inappropriate. She would need to brief the council representatives carefully before the lunch. That evening, Taemin called a meeting with the entire human team. Day One, Ji Woo, Hana, and several other staff members gathered in the conference room. Everyone looked tired. The preparations were demanding, and they only had 4 days left. "I've been getting messages from council members," Taemin said. "They're nervous. Some of them are looking for ways to cancel." "Oh. Taemin. Why?" Ji Woo asked. "Because they're hearing from their own cultural advisors that this lunch violates dozens of social taboos. Eating in groups, sharing food, talking while consuming nutrients. These are all things that make them uncomfortable." Hana leaned forward. "Do they understand that making them slightly uncomfortable is the whole point? We need to get them out of their formal, diplomatic mindset. That's where the real connection happens." "I know that, you know that. But they don't know that," Taemin said. "There's actually a betting pool running in the council chambers. Most of the aliens think this lunch will be humanity's biggest diplomatic failure." Day One, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Let them bet. When they taste my bulgogi fusion, they'll understand what humans have known for thousands of years." "What's that?" Taemin asked. "That food is magic, real magic. It can turn strangers into friends and enemies into allies. You just have to be brave enough to share it." The team worked around the clock for the next 3 days. Day One created 17 different versions of each course, adjusting ingredients and preparation methods to suit different biologies. Some aliens needed high heat. Others needed their food cold. The Lumina required dishes that contained concentrated light energy in crystalline form. Ji Woo worked alongside him, constantly testing and verifying safety. She had never been so exhausted in her life, but she had also never been so excited. They were doing something that had never been done before. They were teaching aliens how to taste. Hana focused on the experience beyond the food. She selected music that would be pleasant, but not overwhelming, to species with different hearing ranges. She designed seating arrangements that would place traditional enemies next to each other, forcing interaction. She prepared conversation topics that would help break the ice. Sang Woo, a junior diplomat, was in charge of logistics. He spent hours testing the custom chairs that had been built for each species. Some aliens needed anti-gravity fields to support their bodies. Others required specialized atmospheres in personal bubbles around their seats. The technical challenges were enormous. On the day before the lunch, the alien observers returned for a final inspection. They walked through Harmony Hall, examining every detail with their scanning devices. The lead observer, a tall crystalline being similar to Chancellor Rix, stopped in the center of the room and looked at the large table that dominated the space. "This is highly irregular," the observer said. "Standard diplomatic protocol requires separate seating for each delegation, with appropriate barriers and security measures." "This isn't a standard diplomatic meeting," Hana replied. "This is lunch. I fail to see the difference." Hana gestured to the table, which had been set with beautiful plates, elegant glasses, and carefully arranged flowers. "A meeting is about exchanging information. Lunch is about sharing experience. The difference is everything." The observer made a notation on its device. "My report will state that humans are attempting an experimental form of diplomacy with high probability of failure. The council should proceed with caution." After the observers left, Hana sat down at the table, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. Taemin found her there a few minutes later. He sat beside her without speaking. "What if they're right?" Hana said quietly. "What if this is a disaster? We're asking them to violate their cultural norms, to do things that make them deeply uncomfortable. Maybe we're being selfish, trying to force our ways on them." Taemin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you remember what Velmoth wrote to me? He said he wanted to understand what happens when humans eat together. That's not us forcing anything. That's him asking for help with something he knows is missing from his life. All of them are missing it. They just don't have the words to describe it. What if we fail? Then we fail. But at least we tried to build a bridge instead of just standing on our side of the river, shouting across the water." That night, Daewon put the finishing touches on his menu. He had created something unprecedented. Each course would start with familiar flavors and gradually introduce new sensations. The first course would be simple, almost bland by human standards. But with each subsequent course, he would increase the complexity, teaching their alien guests to taste. Ji-woo ran final safety checks on every ingredient. She triple-checked her calculations, verified her test results, and prepared emergency protocols in case any species had an unexpected reaction. She was as ready as she could be. Hana reviewed her seating chart one last time. She had placed Ambassador Velmoth next to Taemin, knowing that the reptilian diplomat was genuinely curious about human culture. Chancellor Rix would sit at the head of the table, a position of honor. The warrior Kralek's representative would sit between two peaceful species, forcing a different kind of interaction than he was used to. As Taemin prepared for bed that night, he received one final message. It was from High Chancellor Rix himself. The message was brief. "I confess apprehension about tomorrow's event. My species has not shared meals with others in our entire recorded history. But I am old, and I have learned that the things we fear often teach us the most. We shall see what wisdom humans have to offer." Taemin smiled and closed the message. Tomorrow would change everything. He was sure of it. The morning of the lunch arrived with perfect timing. The lunar sunrise cast long shadows across Harmony Hall's transparent dome, filling the space with soft light. Taemin stood at the entrance, watching the final preparations. Staff members moved quietly, placing the last details on the table. Everything had to be perfect. Yujin arrived early, carrying her geogeum, a traditional Korean string instrument. Hana had hired the musician to provide background atmosphere during the lunch. Yujin looked nervous as she set up her instrument in the corner of the hall. "Have you ever played for aliens before?" Hana asked her. "No," Yujin admitted. "I'm not even sure they'll be able to hear the music properly. Their hearing ranges are different from ours." "Just play from your heart," Hana said. "That's what matters." In the kitchen, Daewon was in his element. He moved between stations with practiced efficiency, his hands steady despite the pressure. The first course was ready. Small bowls of delicate broth, each one specially formulated for a different species, but all sharing the same essential character: warmth, comfort, welcome. Ji Woo checked her medical scanners one last time. She had emergency treatments prepared for every possible reaction, though she hoped desperately that she wouldn't need any of them. Her stomach churned with anxiety, but her hands were steady. This was too important to let fear take over. The alien delegates began arriving at precisely noon. Taemin and Hana greeted each one at the entrance. Their reactions to Harmony Hall were immediate and visible. Most of them stopped just inside the doorway, staring at the single large table that dominated the room. Ambassador Velmoth was among the first to arrive. His reptilian features were difficult for humans to read, but Taemin thought he detected surprise, perhaps even alarm. "Ambassador," Taemin said warmly. "Welcome. Please, come in." Velmoth walked slowly toward the table. He looked at the place settings. The shared serving dishes that were already positioned at intervals along the table's length, and the chairs arranged so close together. "I was not prepared for this," he said quietly. "Prepared for what?" Taemin asked. "To be so close to the others. In council meetings, we each have our own space, our own station. This is very different. That's the point," Hana said gently. "Lunch isn't a meeting. It's a gathering. All the work. All now why. Lunch is not of go. All the word. Tensix and Leifend. H and the first." More delegates arrived. Chancellor Rix entered with his usual dignity, his crystalline body reflecting the light in rainbow patterns. The Kralix warrior, a massive being named Tor, had to duck to fit through the doorway. Several smaller species arrived in groups, speaking in their own languages with what sounded like worried tones. Sang-woo began guiding delegates to their assigned seats. This was when the real anxiety began. The aliens realized they would be sitting directly next to representatives from other species. Not across a wide table with formal barriers between them, right next to each other, close enough to touch. A delegate from the Thalmar species stopped halfway to his chair. "This is too much contact," he said. "My people do not sit this close to strangers." "I understand this is uncomfortable," Hana said, walking over to him. "But I promise you, nothing bad will happen. We're just going to eat together and talk." "That's all." "That is not all," the Thalmar said. "You are asking us to violate fundamental social structures that have existed for thousands of years." Chancellor Rix, who had already taken his seat at the head of the table, spoke up. "Perhaps that is exactly why we should do it. Our social structures have also kept us isolated for thousands of years. Maybe it is time to try something new." The Thalmar hesitated, then slowly walked to his seat. Once everyone was seated, an uncomfortable silence filled the hall. 12 alien species representatives sat at the table, most of them looking profoundly uneasy. They kept glancing at each other, at the humans standing around the edges of the room, at the empty plates in front of them. Tor, the Kralix warrior, broke the silence. Taemin stepped forward. "Before we begin, I want to explain something. In human culture, sharing a meal is one of the most important social activities we have. When we eat together, we're not just consuming nutrients. We're building relationships. We're showing trust. We're saying that for this moment, we're not strangers or enemies. We're just people sitting together, sharing food." "Why?" asked a small, moth-like being. "Why does eating require these additional meanings?" Hana answered. "Because humans are social creatures. Everything we do, we try to connect with others. Even something as simple as eating becomes a way to bond." "This is inefficient," stated a robotic-sounding voice from a mechanical species representative. "Eating could be accomplished in 1/10 the time without social complications." "Maybe," Taemin agreed. "But you would miss the point entirely." He nodded to Sang-woo, who signaled the kitchen. Day 1 and his staff began bringing out the first course. The small bowls of broth were placed in front of each delegate. Steam rose from the bowls, carrying subtle scents into the air. "This is your first course," Hana explained. "We call it a welcoming soup." The aliens stared at their bowls. Nobody moved. The silence stretched out, becoming awkward. Finally, Ambassador Velmoth picked up his spoon and tasted the broth. His reptilian features showed surprise. "It is warm," he said. "I have never had warm food before. My species consumes nutrients at room temperature or cold. Do you like it?" Hana asked. Velmoth took another spoonful, considering. "It is strange, but not unpleasant. The warmth creates a sensation I did not expect. It feels comforting somehow." That broke the ice. Other delegates began trying their soup. Some reactions were neutral. Others showed clear surprise. The moth-like being made a sound that her translator interpreted as pleasure. "This is more than nutrients," she said. "There are flavors. Multiple sensations happening at once. That's what we call taste," Taemin said. "It's one of the great pleasures of being alive." Yujin began playing her Gayagyeom softly. The music drifted through the hall like water, gentle and unobtrusive. Some of the aliens looked toward her with curiosity. Others seemed to relax slightly, though they probably didn't understand why. Chancellor Rix had been silent since tasting his soup. His crystalline form seemed to glow slightly brighter than before. When he spoke, his voice carried genuine wonder. "I have existed for 247 of your years. I have studied science, philosophy, and mathematics. I have led my people through wars and peace, but I have never experienced anything quite like this. Why has my species never discovered this?" "Because you never thought to look for it," Hana said gently. "You saw eating as a necessity, not a possibility." The soup course ended. The bowls were cleared away. The second course arrived. This was where day one began to take risks. The dishes had more flavor, more complexity. Korean-inspired elements mixed with ingredients from 6 Earth continents, all adapted for alien biology. Tor, the Kralix warrior, took a large bite of his dish and immediately stopped chewing. His eyes widened. For a moment, everyone thought something was wrong. Then, Tor began to laugh. It was a deep, rumbling sound that startled several delegates. "This is powerful," he said. "My mouth burns, but I want more." "What is this sensation?" "Spice," Daewon called from the kitchen doorway. "Specifically, gochugaru, Korean red pepper flakes. It feels like battle in my mouth," Tor said. He took another bite, still laughing. "I understand now why humans smile when they eat. This is joy. I undatter, AC. When the humans smile, I undatter." Around the table, barriers were beginning to crack. The delegates were still uncomfortable sitting so close together, still unsure about this strange human tradition. But something was changing. They were talking to each other. Not about politics or trade agreements. About the food. About the sensations they were experiencing. A delegate from the peaceful ether species turned to Velmoth. "Your species is carnivorous, correct? What does your dish taste like?" Velmoth described it. The ether delegate described his own meal. They compared experiences, finding common ground in their shared surprise at the concept of flavor. Taemin caught Hana's eye from across the room. She smiled. It was working. Slowly, carefully, but it was working. The third course arrived. This one included kimchi, adapted into 17 different versions. When the aliens tasted the fermented vegetables, the reactions were extraordinary. Some loved it immediately. Others found it challenging. But everyone had an opinion, and everyone wanted to share that opinion with their neighbors. The conversation around the table grew louder, more animated. These were species that had spent years in formal diplomatic relations, maintaining careful distance and proper protocols. Now they were arguing about whether kimchi was too sour or perfectly balanced. They were laughing at each other's reactions. They were, impossibly, bonding over lunch. The fourth course arrived as the conversation around the table reached a comfortable rhythm. Daewon had prepared his signature dish, a fusion of bulgogi with elements that would surprise even human palates. The meat had been prepared 17 different ways, but each version carried the same essential soul of the dish. Sweet, savory, with layers of flavor that revealed themselves slowly. Ambassador Velmoth took his first bite and froze. His reptilian jaw stopped moving. For several seconds, he didn't breathe or blink. The humans watching began to worry. Then Velmoth set down his utensils carefully, as if they might break. "Is something wrong?" Taemin asked, moving closer. Velmoth didn't respond immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, almost reverent. "I have lived for 93 years. In all that time, I have eaten thousands of meals. Every single one was the same. Nutrients, fuel, necessary, but meaningless. This is the first time I have understood what you mean by the word delicious." Hana sat down next to him. "Tell me what you're experiencing." "It is difficult to explain," Velmoth said slowly. "The taste changes as I chew. First sweet, then something deeper. There are layers I did not know could exist in food, and it makes me feel something. Pleasure, yes, but also something else. Something warm in my chest that has nothing to do with the temperature of the food. That's what we call satisfaction," Hana said gently. "Food can create emotional responses, not just physical ones. That's why humans put so much care into cooking. We're not just feeding bodies. We're feeding feelings." Velmoth looked at her with an expression that transcended species. It was understanding. Deep, genuine understanding. "My people have been missing this. For our entire existence, we have been missing this. How did we not know?" Across the table, Chancellor Rix was having his own revelation. The crystalline being didn't eat in the traditional sense. His species absorbed light energy through specially prepared crystals. Daewon had created something unique for him, infusing synthetic crystals with concentrated flavors that could be absorbed along with the light energy. Rix held one of the crystals up to the light, watching it sparkle. He placed it in a special chamber in his body, where absorption occurred. His glow intensified, shifting through several colors before settling on a warm gold tone. "Remarkable," Rix said. "I can sense the care that went into creating this. The precision. This is not merely functional. This is art." The mechanical species representative, who had earlier complained about inefficiency, made a sound like a computer processing data. "I am detecting elevated dopamine and serotonin levels in the organic beings present. The food is triggering chemical responses in your brains associated with pleasure and social bonding. This is fascinating. The human approach to eating is actually a form of social engineering. We prefer to call it making friends," Taemin said with a smile. The lunch continued. Between courses, something unexpected happened. The aliens began talking about things other than food. They asked each other questions. Personal questions. "How many children do you have? What is your world like? What makes you happy?" These were not topics that came up in formal council meetings. But here, with full stomachs and lowered defenses, the questions flowed naturally. Barriers that had existed for years began to dissolve. Tor, the Kralix warrior, was deep in conversation with the Ether delegate, whose species was known for their pacifism. Under normal circumstances, these two species barely spoke to each other. They had nothing in common. But now Tor was explaining his homeworld's philosophy of honor, and the Ether was listening with genuine interest. "On my world, we believe strength without purpose is meaningless," Tor said, gesturing with his utensils. "A warrior must know what he fights for, not just how to fight." "That is not so different from our beliefs," the Aether replied. We believe peace without understanding is fragile. One must know why peace matters, not just that violence is wrong. Tor considered this. Perhaps our peoples are not so different after all. We both seek meaning, just through different paths. Perhaps we should talk more often, the Aether suggested. Yes, Tor agreed. Perhaps we should. This conversation would have been impossible in a council chamber. But here, over lunch, with food softening their edges and music creating atmosphere, the impossible became simple. Jiwoo watched from her station near the kitchen, monitoring everyone's biological responses. She had expected to spend the lunch dealing with medical emergencies, but instead, she was witnessing something extraordinary. The aliens' stress hormones were decreasing. Their social bonding chemicals were increasing. The food was doing exactly what Day One had promised. It was creating connection. The fifth course brought another surprise. Day One had prepared something controversial. A dish that would challenge the aliens' comfort zones. He called it the sharing plate. It was a large platter placed in the center of the table, designed for multiple beings to eat from simultaneously. When the waitstaff placed it down, several aliens looked alarmed. The concept of eating from the same dish as others was deeply taboo for many species. The Thalmar delegate actually pushed his chair back slightly. "I cannot do this," he said. "Sharing a food source with strangers is too intimate. It violates every social principle my species holds." Hana started to respond, but Chancellor Rix raised a crystalline hand. "May I?" he asked her. She nodded. Rix turned to the Thalmar. "I understand your discomfort. My species also has strict rules about personal space and individual resources. But I have been observing the humans carefully throughout this meal. I believe I am beginning to understand something important." "What is that?" the Thalmar asked. "They make themselves vulnerable on purpose," Rix said. "By sharing food, by sitting close together, by lowering their defenses, they create the possibility for trust. It is a risk, but it is also an invitation. They are saying, 'I trust you enough to be vulnerable near you. Will you trust me?' In return?" The table fell silent. Every alien was listening now. "That is why their diplomacy works when ours fails," Rix continued. "We negotiate from positions of strength, always maintaining our armor. They negotiate from positions of openness, willingly removing their armor. Which approach do you think builds lasting peace?" The Thalmar stared at the sharing plate. Slowly, very slowly, he reached out and took a piece of food from it. He placed it in his mouth. His expression showed fear, then surprise, then something like pride. "I have just done something no member of my species has done in recorded history," he said quietly. "I have shared food with strangers, and I am still alive. I am still myself. But I am also something more now." Ambassador Velmoth reached for the plate next. Then the Ether delegate. Then Tor. One by one, every alien at the table took food from the sharing plate. Some did it easily. Others struggled with their cultural programming. But everyone did it. Yujin's music shifted, becoming slightly more joyful. She sensed the mood in the room and responded to it, her fingers dancing across the Gaiageum strings. The conversation around the table grew even more animated. The aliens were discussing their worlds, their families, their fears, and their hopes. They were laughing at each other's jokes, even when the humor didn't translate perfectly. They were, impossibly, becoming friends. Then something unexpected happened. A political dispute erupted. Two delegates from the Corvin and Bellic species began arguing about a territorial boundary that had been contested for decades. Their voices rose. Their translators struggled to keep up with the rapid exchange. The other aliens at the table grew quiet, watching nervously. In a normal council meeting, this would be the point where security separated the delegates, where the meeting ended in failure, where the wall between species grew higher. But this wasn't a normal meeting. This was lunch. Hana watched, ready to intervene if necessary. But Tae-min placed a hand on her arm, stopping her. "Wait," he whispered. "Watch." The two arguing delegates continued their heated discussion. But something strange happened. They kept eating. Between angry words about border violations and resource rights, they took bites of their food. They sipped their drinks. They gestured with their utensils, and gradually, slowly, their voices became less sharp. The anger didn't disappear completely, but it softened. The food was working its magic, reminding their bodies that survival needs were met, allowing their higher reasoning to emerge. After several minutes, the Corvan delegate said something that shocked everyone. "Perhaps we are both right. Perhaps the boundary should be shared, rather than divided." The Bellix delegate paused, considering. "That is not a solution I had considered. Tell me more." End quote. They began to discuss the idea calmly, rationally, even creatively. Other delegates joined the conversation, offering suggestions. What had started as an argument transformed into collaborative problem-solving. All because they couldn't fight with their hands full, and their stomachs were too satisfied to maintain maximum aggression. Chancellor Rix caught Taemin's eye. The crystalline being's glow had shifted to a warm, approving blue. He raised his glass in a human gesture of respect. Taemin returned the gesture. The lunch was working. Against all odds, against all predictions, it was working. The final course arrived with perfect timing. Dessert. Day one had spent days perfecting this part of the meal. Because dessert was the riskiest course. Most alien species had no concept of eating something purely for pleasure, with no nutritional purpose beyond enjoyment. The idea of sweet as a desirable flavor was completely foreign to them. The serving staff placed small plates in front of each delegate. Each one held carefully crafted treats adapted for different biologies. Korean rice cakes for some. Delicate pastries for others. Crystallized sugar formations for Chancellor Rix. Everything was designed to introduce the concept of sweetness, gently. The moth-like delegate was the first to try her dessert. She took a small taste, and her entire body went still. Her wings, which had been folded against her back throughout the meal, suddenly spread wide. They shimmered with colors that hadn't been visible before. "What is this sensation?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "It is like tasting light, like consuming happiness itself." Jiwoo stepped forward, slightly concerned by the physical reaction. "Wrong?" the moth delegate said. "This is the opposite of wrong. I need to understand what I am experiencing. Explain this to me." Hana sat down near her. "What you're tasting is sweetness. It's a flavor that humans associate with pleasure and celebration. We eat sweet things when we're happy, or when we want to become happy. This is extraordinary," the moth delegate said. "My species has a religious text that speaks of a promised paradise where we will experience pure joy. I always thought it was metaphorical, but this taste is what I imagine that paradise would feel like." Around the table, other delegates were having their own reactions to dessert. Some loved it immediately. Others found it overwhelming. Tor, the Kralix warrior, made a face after his first bite. "Too sweet," he declared. "This is not for warriors." But then, he took another bite. And another. Despite his words, he finished the entire dessert. "Why am I eating this, if I don't like it?" he asked, confused. "Because part of you does like it," Taemin said with a smile. "Your brain is telling you that sweetness means energy, celebration, and reward. Even if your conscious mind is confused, your instincts understand." Ambassador Velmoth ate his dessert slowly, making each bite last. Between tastes, he looked around the table at the other delegates. Something in his expression had changed throughout the meal. The formal diplomatic mask he always wore had slipped away, revealing genuine emotion beneath. "I need to tell you all something," Velmoth said suddenly. His voice was loud enough that everyone stopped talking and turned to look at him. I came to this lunch believing it would be a waste of time. I thought humans were being foolish, trying to force their strange customs on species that had no interest in them. I was wrong. He paused, struggling to find words. My species has been in the galactic community for 4,000 years. We have negotiated countless treaties, made alliances and enemies, engaged in trade, and occasionally war. But we have never truly connected with another species. We have never understood them, and they have never understood us. I thought this was simply how things were. That true understanding between different species was impossible. One step intention into the potential scene of this probably one step intention problem. Velmoth looked directly at Taemin. But you have shown me something today that I cannot ignore. By feeding us, by sitting with us, by making yourselves vulnerable in front of us, you have done more to build real friendship in 3 hours than 4,000 years of formal diplomacy achieved. I don't just respect humans now. I understand you. And I think perhaps you understand me. Chancellor Rix set down his utensil. His crystalline form was glowing brighter than it had all day. Ambassador Velmoth speaks truth. I have served on the Galactic Council for over a century. I have witnessed countless attempts at diplomacy, at peacemaking, at bridge building between species. Most fail because we are too different, too alien to each other. We cannot find common ground. He gestured to the table, to the empty plates, to the faces around him. But humans have discovered something we overlooked. We don't need to find common ground. We need to create it. And you create it through simple acts of connection. Through food. Through music. Through vulnerability. These are not weaknesses, as I once believed. These are your greatest strengths. The Thalmar delegate, who had been so resistant to sharing food earlier, spoke up. I must apologize to the human representatives. I was disrespectful at the beginning of this meal. I thought you were asking us to violate our cultural boundaries for no good reason. Now, I understand that you were offering us a gift. The gift of connection. My people have been isolated for so long that we forgot what it feels like to truly know someone from another species. Today, I remembered. Other delegates began speaking, sharing their experiences and revelations. The Ether delegate talked about how the meal had shown him that peace could be built through small acts of kindness, not just grand gestures. The mechanical species representative calculated that social bonding through shared meals was actually more efficient than traditional diplomacy in terms of lasting results per time invested. Tor stood up, his massive frame towering over the table. For a moment, everyone thought he was leaving. But instead, he bowed deeply to Day One, who was watching from the kitchen doorway. Chef, Tor said formally, on my world, we honor those who have given us great gifts. Today, you have given me something I did not know existed. You have given me joy through food. You have shown me that strength comes in many forms, and that one of the strongest forms is the courage to create beauty in a harsh universe. Daewon looked overwhelmed. He bowed back, tears visible in his eyes. I just cooked food, he said quietly. No, Tor replied. You changed lives. That is far greater than just cooking. Yujin had stopped playing her Gyeogeum at some point, but nobody had noticed because the conversation had become the music. Now she began playing again, a soft melody that felt like a ending and a beginning at the same time. Hana felt tears on her own cheeks. She had hoped the lunch would go well, but she hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to witness the moment when different species truly saw each other for the first time. Taemin stood and raised his glass. I want to thank all of you for coming today, for being brave enough to try something new, for opening yourselves to an experience that violated your comfort zones. You have honored us with your presence and your willingness to connect. Chancellor Rick stood as well. The honor is ours. Humans have taught us something today that our species should have learned millennia ago. That connection is not weakness. That vulnerability is not danger. That the simple act of sharing a meal can do more to build understanding than 1,000 treaties. He looked around at the other delegates. I propose that this lunch become a regular occurrence. That we gather like this monthly, sharing food and conversation, not as formal council meetings but as friends learning to know each other. All in favor? Every hand, claw, tentacle, and appendage at the table went up. As the lunch officially ended and delegates began to slowly leave, many of them lingered. They didn't want the feeling to end. They stood in small groups, still talking, still laughing, still experiencing this new sensation of genuine connection. Ambassador Velmoth was the last to leave. He approached Taemin and Hana, and for a moment, he just stood there, as if trying to find words. "Thank you," he finally said. "For everything. For the food, yes. But more than that, for showing me that I have been living only half a life. I thought eating was just fuel. I thought relationships were just political necessity. I thought joy was a distraction from important work. Today, you showed me that joy is the important work. That connection is what makes life worth living. That food is love made visible." He paused, then added, "Those were the words your chef used when my observers questioned him before the lunch. I didn't understand them then. I do now." After Velmoth left, Taemin and Hana stood alone in Harmony Hall. The table was empty now, covered with the evidence of the meal. Empty plates, used glasses, crumbs and napkins, and the small, beautiful mess that humans make when they eat together. "We did it," Hana said softly. "No," Taemin replied. "They did it. We just gave them the opportunity. They were brave enough to take it." Daewon emerged from the kitchen, looking exhausted but happier than Hana had ever seen him. Jiwoo was right behind him, still carrying her medical scanner even though she had never needed to use it. "I can't believe that worked," Jiwoo said. "Based on every model I ran, there should have been at least 3 medical incidents and 2 diplomatic disasters. Instead, I think we just witnessed the beginning of something historic." "Food is magic," Daewon said simply. "Real magic. I told you." That evening, as Earth rotated into night and the lunar base lights came on, reports began flooding in from across the galactic communication network. Word of the lunch had spread. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds were hearing about what happened in Harmony Hall. The aliens who attended were already calling it the most important diplomatic event in galactic history. Chancellor Rix sent a formal message to Earth's government, but he also sent a personal message to Taemin. "You have changed everything. The galaxy will never be the same. And that is wonderful." Taemin showed the message to Hana. She smiled, but she also looked worried. "This is going to get complicated, isn't it? Everyone will want to do this now. Every species will want to learn about human meal traditions." "Let it get complicated," Taemin said. "Complicated is good. Complicated means engagement. Complicated means they care. That's infinitely better than the alternative." As they prepared to leave Harmony Hall, Sang-woo ran up to them with his tablet. "You need to see this. It's already starting." He showed them a news feed from a dozen different alien worlds. Restaurants were being planned. Cooking schools were being established. Species that had never cared about food before were suddenly desperate to learn about flavor, about recipes, about the art of eating together. The galaxy was waking up to something it had been missing for millennia, and humanity had been the teacher.